Welcome everyone to this evening's webinar. Everyone needs good neighbours, how Oxford's volunteers and community groups responded to COVID-19. I'm Dan and I head up the Oxford Alumni Chapter. We are really excited to have you join us to celebrate the end of Volunteers Week 2021. Volunteers Week is an annual celebration to say thank you to the millions of volunteers for their contribution. The last two volunteer weeks have been extraordinary. Volunteering has played such an integral part in how communities have supported each other during the pandemic that we felt would be appropriate to highlight and hear from organisations and individuals about their role during this time. So you're very welcome this evening. A few bits of housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded. It is a webinar, so we won't be able to see you, but please do use the chat functionality if you have any issues. We'll be having Q&A at the end, so please post your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom, and we will then collate those for the speakers at the very end. So we'll do Q&A once we've heard from all of the speakers, and we're due to finish around about 7 o'clock this evening. So this evening's being put on by the Oxford Alumni Chapter. We're all volunteers. We're still very much a new group, having formed during lockdown, and the aim of the Oxford Chapter is to put on interesting events, currently online, hopefully face to face as the year goes on, but for alumni who are based in Oxfordshire, and we want to engage the alumni community to support each other, to network and deliver interesting and topical events. So this evening we have some fantastic speakers coming up. We have Clayton and Azul from Oxford City Council. We have Riki, the founder of Food for Charities. Joe is an Oxford chapter member and volunteers for the Botley Community Fridge. And Muireann, who is the director of Oxford Mutual Aid. So we have some fantastic speakers coming up this evening. And before we kick off and hear from our speakers, I just thought it'd be helpful to set the scene on volunteering and what's been happening over the last 18 months or so. I work in the voluntary sector and have a keen interest in understanding what's been happening in volunteering, and the spotlight on volunteering has really come into sharp focus over the last 18 months, from national programs like the NHS volunteering scheme to local volunteering with individuals picking up prescriptions for neighbours on their street, and the rise of mutual aid groups and community volunteering has had a significant impact during the pandemic. Communities are getting involved in supporting the most vulnerable people during their time of need, and what this has led to is new people getting involved and being mobilised to help out, and that national conversation around volunteering is something which hasn't been seen at scale since the Olympics, and I think it's really important that we kind of frame tonight's conversation in that space. So I'm really pleased to invite on screen our first speaker, or speakers, sorry, and they are Clayton and Azul from Oxford City Council. Welcome, Clayton. Welcome, Azul. Really great to have you both with us this evening. We're going to hear from you about Oxford City Council's response to the pandemic and how you've worked with volunteers and other organisations. So welcome this evening, and thank you very much for giving up your time. And I believe that you have some slides that you want to share with us, which we will let you do now. I'm going to pop off camera so that the focus is on you guys.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Azul, my colleague Clayton, and I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, let me see. Slideshow, there we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. So yes, my name is Azul from Corcoran. I work for Oxford City Council as a locality coordinator, currently covering the central part of the city as part of the COVID response team. And I've been doing that for the last 15 years, which have been a complete roller coaster. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what the City Council has been as a good neighbour over this 15 months. And Clayton will go in to explain some of the economic development work that's being done to recover, for the city to recover post-COVID. So I'm going to touch on a couple of things. First, lockdown week, partnerships, the model we've been using, the impact that hopefully volunteers and the kind of mutual support has had in the city, but also some of the lessons that we're getting from the last 15 months. So really, lockdown week, everything changed that week. The country went into lockdown. We heard on the 23rd of March that by the end of the week, we would be going into a full lockdown. But the City Council, instead of locking down, it sprung into action. It launched 6 locality response hubs, which covered the whole city, and it repurposed about 80 staff that were deployed across those 6 locality hubs. I personally ran the one in East Oxford that covered a lot of Cowley Road area, but also we repurposed and completely turned around our contact centre into a single point of contact. And the big message that went out in all our networks, through our partners, we tweeted, we Facebooked, everything, saying, don't be afraid to ask for help. Whatever it was, whether people were shielding or they were just self-isolating, or just didn't have anyone in the city to be able to reach out to, we would be that point of contact. Come and, and see us, come and speak to us, give us a call, and we'll be there. So we couldn't have done that without the partnership with Oxford Hub to launch Oxford Together. Oxford Together is really a partnership to be able to match residents, those in need, or those that, as I mentioned, were isolating or shielding, with local volunteers, whether they were neighbours, friends, or just complete strangers, but matching up volunteers at a really localised level. They split the city, again, in multiple areas, in neighbourhoods or streets, and launched as well their Street Champion network. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a bit, but the partnership with Oxford Hub allowed us to really capitalise and empower the volunteers that had the collective action to come together and respond to the COVID need. We also had multiple other partnerships, but a really formalised one where we were able to share data, share information, but respond really quickly was set up as part of the Oxford Together. We worked on building trust, because with new relationships, new partnerships, then it's not always there. There isn't that track record. But it also allowed us to leave some historic differences behind for collective good. We built some fantastic relationships with the 4 city mosques to help people through Ramadan, which was at the height of the lockdown in 2020. It was one of the hottest Ramadans in record, well, in the UK. So there was a lot of people that were in real need. So having those partnerships with those trusted community leaders in the city were really beneficial. But they themselves had a huge pool of volunteers that weren't your typical volunteer, weren't the ones that signed up to do shifts at your local, charity shop, those standard volunteer opportunities. They were helping their neighbours, their friends, but also people they didn't know but knew that they needed a little bit of support. As part of that, we learned how to be agile, how to be flexible from our partners, because that's a local authority. We're not known to move very quickly, but we learned how it's done and that it could be done very quickly and well, as long as we we mutually support each other. So the picture you see at the bottom there is us, and actually one of the speakers later on, Muireann, and her organisation, Oxford Community Action. We also had Oxford Mutual Aid, Oxford Community Action, Oxford Homeless Project, and a range of other partners. And we did the grand iftar, so we pulled together and produced 200 meals in one day to be able to break fast as part of Ramadan that year. And it just showed how partnerships that didn't work together before were able to come together and mutually support one another. So how did our model work? Really, it was a change of attitude. We were moving away from providing service to just providing support, understanding, hearing more, willing to take the time to hear people's needs. One of the key things that happened, most of our call centre staff have to do certain calls within a certain time. That time clock got taken away. We had time to understand people's needs and understand the root causes of why they were calling us, not just dealing with a request that was being made. We moved into a kind of a approach which is called bespoke by default, and it looked at working with people, understanding the need, but also having each solution very different to the next. It wasn't just a tick box exercise. We were working with, again, Oxford Hub to match our volunteers if the need was the practical support, whether it was to pick up a prescription or walk their dog while they were shielding, or even as simple as bringing a 94-year-old lady, Mary. I remember her, all she wanted was a bit of milk to having her cup of tea, and she hadn't had one in a week. And it was really hurting and, you know, breaking her heart because, you know, her cup of tea was her, you know, her thing that calmed her down. So just those little things made a huge difference, and something that as a local authority we would normally not do. We were also undertaking requests directly, not through volunteers, but also signposting to suitable professional support. There was a huge increase in mental health, and we could work with volunteers and upskill them, but there was some support that needed to be passed on to those professionals. But we also recognised that a lot of the work we were doing around food distribution, and well, it was mainly around the food network, and Muireann will probably say a little bit more about that later. We couldn't continue doing that after about 6-9 months. So we worked with the partnerships and with the local infrastructure and funded a lot of the transition people from our support to the more mutually support partners in the city. But really, it's all about the impact and the impact the volunteers produced and gave and made, really. They were neighbours, friends, strangers, colleagues and students. We were seeing a very different volunteer base, not your standard volunteers, and we were finding there were areas which normally would have high social capital, and a lot of volunteers had none because that volunteer base, because of age, disability, for whatever reason, maybe shielding, or no longer able to provide that practical support. It was too risky. So new and younger volunteers were coming forward, with Oxford being having 2 major universities, as we know, yourselves and Oxford University. A lot of the students really came and answered that collective action and gave a different view to what volunteering was and is, really. The impact was shown differently. We commissioned storytelling work with the old fire station to be able to really tell the stories of the volunteers, but also about those that got support. We did videos, but also we didn't forget the small things. So the picture you see there is me in April 2020 going to see John, who his internet had weren't working. No one would go and see him because we were in lockdown, but because he couldn't hear or speak, he had to use video messaging, and without internet his life was completely shut in. So we bought a internet dongle and dropped it off and used place cards to just check if he was okay. So those little things where we would have never done before, but volunteers and just the agileness of them, they taught us that we can do things differently. And just going back to the bigger picture, I think the work that the volunteers in Oxford and the work that we have been doing really saved lives. And I don't know whether we could have said that a couple of years ago, but this last 15 years, kind of the impact is really quite huge. Just to finish things off, I wanted to say the 5 lessons that came out of the impact report that Old Fire Station did on our behalf. And it picked up on needing to invest in relationships, understanding your partners, and that mutual respect. Again, the smaller things really do matter. Collaboration is key to the work we're doing, and we need to be less hierarchical, I can never say that word, in decision making. Also, we need to be more creative, take risk, be bold, but also empower groups and communities, as well as volunteers, to do what they know best, and they know their community best. And then the last one is my own lesson, and it's, let's put our egos down. Let's just say when we don't know what we're doing, or it's all new to us, to say, okay, let's learn together. So yeah, that's my part, and I will pass over to Clayton.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is Clayton, and it's great to join this evening. And when I joined the economic development team in September of last year, one of the things that really encouraged me to want to rejoin the council and to work in economic development was seeing the fantastic work that people like Azul were doing in the communities team, how agile and collaboratively they'd responded to the crisis, and how it really indicated there was a real change in the culture and ways of working at the council, which, quite frankly, I wanted to be part of. So yeah, hopefully, can I now drive the slide deck? Azul, are you going to do that for me? Apologies. Oh yeah, okay, great. Won't be a moment. So yeah, it was seeing that response and seeing the effectiveness of that response when I joined the council. It really made us think about our broader work to support the economy and how it might build on that approach in terms of the community work, and how really it helped us to reframe that if we were working on economic development in the right way and in an effective way, we were also doing really good community development. We were building on the back of it effectively. So I'll just share screen. Apologies for the delay. Won't be a moment. Definitely a mistake asking to swap screens there. Sorry about that. So yeah, apologies for that, sharing screen now. And as we joined the team, we really wanted to think about how could we build on that great way in which the communities team had responded to the crisis, and how the community team had really demonstrated how we could be a better neighbour, both in terms of how we could support residents of Oxford City, but also our partners and also other councils that we're working with across the county, thinking about county and district authorities as well. So one of the first ways that we did that was that we started a project called Meanwhile in Oxfordshire. And this drew down on central funding from the Getting Building Fund, which had been administered by Oxlet, the Oxfordshire Local Enterprise Project. And the real thrust of this project was that we wanted to help tackle the number of vacant units that were coming up commercially and turn over those empty shops in the high street, which were depressing and really demoralising, over to really vibrant, diverse use in the high street. So originally this project was called the Town Centre Renaissance Project, because the idea was that we would funnel that funding into the refurbishment of those shops, inviting in a diverse range of businesses, social enterprises to take up those normally unaffordable commercial units on a meanwhile lease that was affordable, to really build their own business, but also to help drive footfall and spend back to the high street and help diversify the uses of the high street to make it a far more exciting and vibrant place. As you remember very well from the previous lockdowns, footfall really plummeted in the city centre here in Oxford, but also across the other urban units of the other parts of the county. So this was a really urgent action. So we work together with county and with the district authorities across the county to work together to set up this project to really tackle those empty units and to create an opportunity to help our urban centres flourish again. On the back of a seminar series that we ran just before COVID hit us, we also wanted to see how we could work in a way as an economic development team that would foster an inclusive economy. And again, that meant working county-wide. So seeing how we could be a good neighbour to our fellow district and county councils, working really closely together with partners from the voluntary community sector, private and public sector, to see how we could drive growth as a region towards more inclusive opportunities to help tackle inequality in the city and close that gap. As many people know, Oxford City is the second most unequal place in the country. So it's a horrific legacy that we want to tackle. And working in an inclusive way as a partnership, we've set up an Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership led by Oxford Strategic Partnership and Oxlep, with support from the Oxfordshire Growth Board and with a whole range of partners from across the county, all driving forward this inclusive economy agenda. We're going to do this through 4 working groups principally, but also by launching a charter and a pledge scheme as well. And again, this is just an example of a way that we wanted to kind of respond to COVID in the immediate term, but then help to build and foster a culture that was more mutual, more collaborative longer term, so that we were building back not only better, but more fairly and more inclusively longer term. We also joined the Kickstart Scheme when it launched with DWP in September 2001, and 2020 rather, and we're acting as a gateway for that scheme. So we're supporting employers over 6-month placements for young people who are 16 to 24, either on universal credit or long-term unemployed, to help them to gain experience to then get into the labour market. And this is one way in which we're acting as a good neighbour, by working in partnership county-wide, but also by helping to tackle some of the huge impacts on people's households and livelihoods that we've seen as a result of the disruptions to the labour market with COVID. Attached to that, but also as a separate project, we delivered a pilot project from September until March of this year with Aspire Oxfordshire. And this was offering triage support for employability skills, particularly for those people who'd lost their job as a result of the impacts of COVID, who wanted to retrain and reskill and then retransition back into the labour market. The project also had a longer term aim to help kind of regenerate interest in and build support for community employment generally across the city. And we're seeing that with interest in community employment and skills plans re-emerging in areas like Parton Park and also in the north part of the city. But it was also a way for us to work with voluntary and community sector partners to kind of support those people who'd had to retrain and retransition into new work as a result of the impacts of COVID-19. Another example is that we really wanted to build on the asset-based community development approach that's exemplified by a team like Azul's, and think about community wealth building in terms of the economy. We wanted to see how we could foster and support the local economy to invest in itself and grow, so that it would help mitigate some of those negative impacts of COVID. So a consortium was set up between Oxford City Council and voluntary and community sector partners that are listed here, supporting cooperatives and employee-owned businesses to particularly develop and grow in the areas of deprivation of the city. This way, it would help to develop that sector and to support businesses to thrive and grow, but also support people at the grassroots in the areas of most deprivation in the city. This has also led to a small test and learn pilot that we're delivering as part of our membership of the Cooperative Councils Innovation Network, where we're supporting co-ops and purposeful businesses in the areas of deprivation to grow and build capacity through linking in with the procurement teams of large anchor institutions in the city, so that we're using that purchasing power through procurement to really leverage in capacity building opportunities to develop social value across the city. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Clayton. This is all really, really interesting about the work that Oxford City Council has been doing, and especially that piece around partnership work was absolutely fascinating. If you have some questions that you'd like to ask Clayton and Azul, then please pop them in the Q&A chat at the bottom of the screen. Next, I'm really excited to introduce Riki, who is the founder of Food for Charities. Hi, Riki. Really good to see you and welcome. So, Riki, you're going to talk a bit about the work that you've been doing with Food for Charities over the last year during the pandemic. So I will let you introduce a bit more about yourself, and I'll let you share your screen.
Is that shared now?
It is, that is shared. Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay, so I'm Riki. I got my PhD from Oxford Brookes, so hello to everyone from Oxford Brookes. And now I'm a visiting professor, but I visit only rarely, so you won't see me up there that often. I started Food for Charities in 2014 with the main aim of reducing food waste. You may be familiar with the Oxford Food Hub, which has been picking up surplus food in Oxford from supermarkets and delivering it to charities. And I thought, what a great idea. What a shame that someone's taken over Oxford, which is my city. So I did the same thing in Banbury in 2014. And we're heading towards COVID shortly, but just a little bit of background. So that took a year or two. And then it took another couple of years to get the fourth community fridge in the country set up in Botley in West Oxford. And a community fridge, for those of you who are not familiar with that, is a fridge in a public space into which anyone can put food and from which anyone can take food. But it's mostly that volunteers pick up surplus food from supermarkets again and bring it there, and anyone can take food. And what you'll see, the fridge itself aims to reduce food waste so anyone can take from there. The shelving on the right-hand side, which has the tins and stuff on it, is it's not surplus food, it's food that people donate in supermarkets, but the aim there is to provide food to people in need. So the top two shelves are only for people in need, and the bread and stuff at the bottom two shelves are for anyone again. So this fridge aims to reduce food waste and provide to people in need. And again, that took a couple of years to set up. And then also it took a couple of years to set up the Blackbird Leys Community Fridge and Larder. So Blackbird Leys, you may be familiar with the fact that it's one of the, it's in the top 10 most deprived areas in England, surprisingly for a city like Oxford. And so again, a community fridge top left. And then we also set up a community larder, which is like a food club where people pay £3.50 per week. And for that, they get to choose a certain amount of food. Again, most of that food is surplus, this time from wholesalers rather than supermarkets, so it's run on a regional scale. And unfortunately, the larder ran for about 9 months, and then we had COVID. So we had these various things going, and then suddenly we had to shut an awful lot. So I'm now going to focus on the Botley Community Fridge, which is my baby. And what we basically, I thought, wonderful, after 3-4 years of running a fridge, I can take a break. And then Sarah there, who's smiling, that's not actually a happy smile, it's like a, haha, I'm going to make you work harder, Riki smile. She said, and a friend of hers said, well, can we still get the food from the supermarkets and distribute it, just not through the community fridge? So for a couple of weeks, we basically had a rota. You can see there's a little sign pasted onto that big sign that says free food. It says next virtual fridge events. So we had a series of events where volunteers would bring the food and sit out there with the food. And in her hand is the hand sanitizer, and people could take food. And then it was decided, government decided that this was attracting people towards each other. So we had to stop that as well. And happily, the parish council offered this big, gorgeous, beautiful hall. I'm in love with the hall. We no longer have it for us, for our activities. And at that point, we basically became a food parcel delivery service. So what you'll see is what Azul was talking about being agile. We had to be awfully agile last year. So we were given this fantastic hall. We were lent this nice big fridge on the right-hand side. The one on the left-hand side is the original community fridge. And then we got an awful lot of, or a wonderful amount of volunteers. So essentially we put out a note that said to people, if you need food, let us know. We didn't check for need or anything like that. We just assumed that if people needed it, they could contact us, which they did. And we started out, these are the top 2 photos, with relatively small quantities and 1 driver, and then moved over the course of the summer to 350 families and 20 drivers. And you'll see the bottom two pictures are kind of the scale that we were kind of heading at in the middle of the summer. We were getting food from Sophia, which is an organization based in Didcot, which picks up surplus food from wholesalers, and they were providing free parcels, and that was in the boxes. But then we were supplementing it with the surplus food that we were picking up from supermarkets, and that's in the bags. You can also see some nice flowers on top of there that came from the supermarkets as well. And in this particular week, we had women's hygiene products also donated by another group. So we were distributing that. And you might see in the bottom right-hand side in one of the plastic bags, there's a roll of toilet paper. So the parish council kindly decided that toilet paper was an essential, and they provided toilet paper for every family that we delivered to in that summer. In total, we delivered 12,000 parcels. So we became one of the 3 big food hubs in Oxford, and ours is the only one run only by volunteers. We had 70 volunteers, some of whom picked up the food, some of them whom packed the food, and some of whom delivered the food. For me, it was fantastic because I got to meet so many new people that I'd never met before. And also it was a good challenge because I've always promised myself that I would never manage, because I just don't like managing. And I was suddenly in charge of managing 70 people. So it was really good to be pushed outside the comfort zone, but mostly to meet all the wonderful neighbours. So on every Thursday, we would deliver to about 300 families, a kind of standard set of parcels, either size 1 for smaller families or size 2 for bigger families. And then on Mondays, we had about 60, 70 families with small children or special requirements. And so you can see there, we've got the milk and the nappies for the children. We also provided incontinence pads and pants for people who needed those. So, and we got funding for that. And again, this is where the City Council being very agile and other organizations being very agile came in. We managed to get a lot of funding for these kinds of things. And we wouldn't be able to have been able to do that if the regular time scale for funding, which would be 6 months to a year, that was shortened to less than a month in most cases. That was fantastic. You can see Joe, whom you'll be seeing shortly. Again, and here he's packing. This is kind of the height of what we were doing. So you can see loads of perishables in front of you. This is from the supermarkets, and non-perishables in the back, provided by various organizations. And this is Orit, who ran all the volunteers for me. So I was in charge of money and food, and she was in charge of getting the volunteers. This is us having our end of summer party, because at the end of August, we shut that part of our service. And at that point, because we no longer had the hall, we no longer had the free food parcels from Sophia, we were thinking, well, what do we do with everyone who's been relying on this food? And so we started up Botley Community Larder, so the food club, again, but in Botley, which runs now, and it's got more than 100 families. The Lees Community Larder has started up again. We've fundraised for a manager there, and that's got more than 100 members. And the Botley Community Fridge has moved, so it's no longer a little fridge in an alcove of a church. It's the same little fridge, but it's got a bit more space, and it's right in the lobby of the church, and it's extremely popular. So just to finish off with my baby, in April of last year, when I realized I do a lot of volunteering with homeless people, I realized that a lot of homeless services were either being shut or were so safety conscious that everyone was behind plexiglass and face shields and face masks and plastic aprons. I just thought, I don't want this. And so with our food from the community fridge, we started doing bicycle deliveries. Now we're doing it 3 times a week. We bring milk and fruit and bread and eggs and tins and bags of sweets and toilet paper and clothing 3 times a week, three people each time. If you're interested in volunteering, contact me, because we always need more volunteers for the Botley Bikers. It's a lot of students who by nature are a transient organization. And this is Gary getting not only a cup of coffee from Pete, but also a chick, which is knitted by a local resident. This is me. We hand out clothes every 2 weeks. Tomorrow is going to be one of these sessions where we hand out clothes. The council's been donating shoes, socks and underwear to that. There's been an awful lot of cooperation. It's been so much fun. And this is some of us saying goodbye.
Thank you, Riki. That was so interesting. And my big takeaway there was that piece around agile and agility and how you were able to move at pace and react to the needs of people who were really in need. So thank you for that. That was really, really fascinating. Next up, we have Joe. Hi, Joe. Joe is also a chapter member and has done some incredible amount of volunteering over the last year. So welcome, Joe, and thanks again for agreeing to share some of your experiences over the last year. So I will go off camera and I'll let you introduce yourself and go ahead with your talk.
Thank you very much, Dan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Parton. I've just shared my screen like everyone else. Hopefully you can see it. I am a former Brooks student myself, graduated in 2014. I'm very delighted to be a committee member on the Alumni Chapter, celebrating being a part of Oxford Brooks still in this wonderful city of Oxford. And I also played a bit of a part as a volunteer in the last 18 months in the pandemic. So I'm going to share some of my experiences. And hopefully by doing so, by providing a snapshot of my experience, I can offer an insight into why I personally think volunteering is so important, why we all think volunteering, all of us on this call think it's so important, and highlight perhaps 3 benefits to continue this impact that volunteers have in Oxford. So to start off, I'm going to rewind to the start of 2019. I'd been offered a new job, which I was excited to start. And then we were all hearing rumours of this virus, and all of a sudden we were in lockdown. And unfortunately, the offer of employment was withdrawn. So I was one of the people who was then unemployed and in lockdown. And so I decided, after a bit of a panic, to what can I do to help? Because I want to come out of this, the other side, whenever it ends, and have something to say, what part I played in this moment of history, how I saw it. And the first benefit, I suppose, of volunteering is that it allows you to play to your strengths. And so I did just that. I just moved to Botley, and behind my new house was the wonderful hall, which Riki was showing you, which was very quickly mobilizing, as you saw. And so I arrived, and playing to my strengths, I had lots of free time because I didn't have a job. I also had a car. I also had a bike. So I arrived and said, what can I do to help? And I was very quickly enlisted to deliver some of these parcels that Riki and the team were preparing. So there's me next to my car on the right-hand side, full of parcels to deliver. I was doing that every Monday and every Thursday, delivering to people just streets away. Another huge benefit is that you're supporting your local community. And on the left, I'm holding a bag and it's full of leaflets which I handed out to my street, introducing myself and saying, look, if you need any help, if you're isolating, if you're alone, if you need anything, then I can hopefully help you. And so I wanted to play a part in, even though I was new to Botley. And it was great to see so much mobilization of neighbours. And I was very happy to be one of them. And there were WhatsApp groups set up for streets and Facebook groups and all sorts of community groups and flyers going through post boxes to help people. Also, a little warning, be careful what you wish for. About 6 months before the pandemic, I was doing a very busy job. It involved traveling around the world quite a lot. It was very tiring, very enjoyable though. But I remember saying to a friend of mine in one tired evening, we drove past a supermarket delivery lorry and I said, oh, that would be a good job for a few months. I wouldn't mind doing a bit of that as a bit of a throwaway comment. Little did I know that I would be doing that for the best part of 6 months during a global pandemic. So be careful what you say out loud because it might come true. Playing to your strengths could also mean doing something very close to your heart. I've lived in Oxford for 10 years and I've noticed very acutely the problem of homelessness in Oxford. It's very obvious, it's incredibly sad, and I've always felt that I wanted to do more. And so I very quickly and very happily got enlisted into Riki's Botley Bikers. And so there's Riki on the right-hand side heading down Botley Road. You can tell it's Botley Road because of the traffic cones, which are normally a feature. And I've been part of this brilliant team delivering, like Riki said, almost everything, even books and mobile libraries, all sorts of things we deliver to people on the streets, and people who are either homeless, vulnerably housed at a time when the streets were empty. And as well as providing food and amenities, it's also providing companionship for a lot of these people. And so another thing that I would, if you're thinking of volunteering, think about the impact you want to have and the change you want to see in your city. That's what I try to do. And I thought this is a brilliant time to realise something that I've always wanted to do, which is to help people who are vulnerable, vulnerably housed. This is a wonderful initiative which Riki and the team are continuing now. And if you do have a bike and the odd spare evening or spare weekend, we'd love you to join the team. But of course, the spring and summer turned into autumn and winter. We were still in lockdown, and the situation became even more desperate, especially as we approached Christmas and into January. And so I did my best, although I was still struggling for employment, to continue to help. And we're going to be hearing from Muireann at Oxford Mutual Aid, and I got involved with them. And so the second benefit of volunteering is the sheer amount of the different ways that you can help. It's not just certain things you can do. And I discovered there's lots of different things that I can help with. So on the left-hand side, it's much colder in that photo. By the way, prizes for people that can count the number of thumbs up in this slideshow. I carried on delivering to people who, you remember, we were sort of out of lockdown, but people were still having to isolate. There was lots of unemployment, lots of desperate people. And so lots of people were continuing to try and help, delivering in the snow, in the rain, in the sleet. But also I got involved in Fair Share, which was a charity that helps supermarkets to coordinate their food waste. So I'm part of a team that go around mornings, evenings, weekends, collecting lots of surplus food. This isn't waste, this is surplus, completely edible food that would have been thrown away, and then distributing it to the Botley Community Fridge, to Oxford Mutual Aid. And so there I am outside Waitrose in Headington with a wonderful haul of lovely, delicious, very high quality food, which we could then distribute for free. We ran some stats after 6 months or so of doing this, and we realised that we'd saved over 4,500 kilograms of food in Oxford, which would have gone to waste. That's the equivalent of the average waste generated by 10 people, food waste in the UK each year, which our team had saved, which is just a brilliant thing to be able to calculate and a brilliant impact to continue to have. So there's lots of different ways, as I said, you can volunteer. The next slide shows some of the more varied ways that I have been involved with. Top left, lots of boxes of books which were collected by various charities, and then I helped to distribute them to schools when they reopened so that children could help to read, to have, especially more children from more disadvantaged backgrounds. So we did a collection to make sure schools had materials. Bottom left, that's the boot of my car full of nappies and formula, and there was a few weeks where I was labelled the nappy man by a number of families in Oxford, especially new mums and young families, and I would arrive and be very happy to deliver them with these essential items for having a new baby. And on the right hand side, this was just before the main image of this. This is me transporting 60 dozen eggs, I think, from a farm in rural Oxfordshire back to the centre. I'm really sorry if you were one of the several cars that was stuck behind me as I was doing about 30 miles an hour down the dual carriageway, trying not to make a complete mess of the inside of my car. So there's what we could do, and what I ended up doing was so varied. And I was just one of so many volunteers all around Oxford that were playing their part in keeping the city going. the third and final benefit, which I saw, was seeing the impact of what we were doing. I absolutely love living in Oxford. I love the city, and I was very conscious of wanting it to be a place where residents helped each other, especially during this emergency, and keeping your volunteering local as possible helps you to see the impact that you have. And this is a final slide, which I'll show you. Two ways that I personally saw the impact of what I was doing. There was one family I was delivering. It was a mum, dad, and 5 very young and energetic boys who were really struggling, who I was delivering to regularly. On the left-hand side, I arrived one day and I saw I was presented with this. They coloured this in for me, and they presented this as a way of thanking me, which was lovely. And on the right-hand side, Riki and I and the team were delivering on the bikes to the community who are homeless and vulnerably housed. And we arrived, I think it was August bank holiday, I can't quite remember, and they'd all passed this card around to sign. So obviously nobody should volunteer for the platitudes and for the accolades. However, a bonus of help putting yourself forward and volunteering is that often you are appreciated. And an additional benefit would be, from my perspective, I was also going through, what everyone was going through in terms of the pandemic. I was unemployed and there was lots of uncertainty, but volunteering was also fantastic for my mental well-being, mental health. And if you are somebody who very understandably has struggled through this year, there's lots of ways of boosting your mental and physical well-being. I certainly think that, in terms of physical well-being, lugging all of that food up on that very shaky bike that Riki keeps giving me was one way of doing that. So I would really encourage you to do that. The final image I'll show you is just for a bit of a laugh. Some of the great people I've met during volunteering, and this is my favourite, not really a person. This is Hamish, who is a resident in Botley, and Hamish and his friend George helped to consume all of the food that wasn't quite suitable for humans and helped us to further reduce food waste. It's a wonderful, very handsome young pig here who I had the pleasure of meeting on a few occasions delivering some of the food. So as well as all the serious stuff that volunteering achieves, it also helps you meet some of the more eccentric people, animals, families in your community. So that was my experience and the small part that I played, and hopefully it inspires. Well, what I'd like to see really is that that this community spirit garnered by charities such as Riki's Muireann's, garnered by the Oxford City Council, continues, and that individuals in this city and beyond leave this pandemic wanting to help their residents more. So I hope you enjoyed that little snapshot into my own experience, and I'm going to hand back to Dan.
Thanks, Joe. I made a little note to make sure that I definitely get out to visit Hamish at some point very, very soon. A couple of things, just a couple of reflections before we move on. It's really interesting what you say around being thanked, and actually thanking volunteers is so important, and that's the reason why we put this webinar on today, to celebrate the end of Volunteers Week, and that sense of thanking people for their huge contribution is so vitally important. And the other point that I want to pick up on was just around this piece around the choice in volunteering that you mentioned, Joe, and something that I see when I work with charities and universities. It's just this piece around choice and volunteers self-selecting into different types of volunteering, and not just sticking with one type of volunteering, and this movement around the fluidity of volunteering and it being easy and flexible is really important, and especially when it comes to mutual aid groups, but also micro volunteering. And I think it's really great to see all the different types of volunteering that you've done over the last year, Joe, and the incredible contribution that you've made. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And finally, we have Muireann, who is one of the founding directors for Oxford Mutual Aid. Hello there.
Hello. Welcome to my talk. No, it's really... You know what? it's been a year, so we'll forgive me for that.
Absolutely. Well, I will go off camera and I'll let you go through your presentation. But thank you very much for joining us this evening. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Muireann.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Muireann. I am a director at Oxford Mutual Aid. And it's really, really great to be here, especially to follow the presentations of people like Joe, who is an incredible volunteer, people like Riki, who I look up to, think she's incredible, all the work she does. So yeah, it's really, really great to be here. So I'm just going to share my screen now and basically start my presentation. So yeah, Oxford Mutual Aid was formed actually fairly recently in comparison to some of the other, I guess, initiatives we've heard about, because we were formed in response to the pandemic. So just prior to lockdown, maybe February 2020, there was a small group of us that came together and we kind of said, okay, you know, how do we respond to this? We've all kind of been local activists for a while, or been not involved in local community organizing, and so it seemed it was something very natural to us that we would actually get engaged in kind of like the local effort to, I guess, support one another. What's quite interesting about when OMA started, though, is I was actually in Ireland at the time. Wasn't even in Oxford, but obviously I'm attached to the city because I've lived here for so long, but I was just living back in Ireland for a little while. I'm back in Oxford now, thankfully. But yeah, so a lot of the work I did initially was remote. But we've basically grown really an amazing amount in the past year, which I'll speak to more about now. So I guess in this presentation, like, I can talk for Ireland, so I'll probably have to be stopped because I have about 10 billion slides. But I want to tell you a little bit more about OMA, our principles, you know, what we're kind of founded upon, our story. I guess a little bit more about kind of like food poverty in Oxford and why we kind of have the approach we do. And then hopefully I'll be able to move on to telling you a little bit more about how OMA works as an organisation, in that we're non-hierarchical, we work in teams, very, very team-based. So if you're keen to get involved and like have time and energy, Joe can attest that you will be given a job to do and responsibility. So yeah, Oxford Mutual Aid, probably it's really important to remember that we're based on a notion of solidarity and not charity. So we believe in mutually supporting one another, that we can mutually take care of each other by organising around our common needs and resources. It's really important to us that we empower those we support, that we work in good faith with them, and that means we don't means test support, that we risk people, and that we also take time to reflect on what we're doing. Mutual aid is not apolitical. It's a theory of political organising. It's used to refer to lots of grassroots movements with its kind of foundations in the civil rights movements in the States. And we have some internal presentations on that if we do decide to join up, because some people know a lot more about it. So the OMA story, we started in April, that should actually say February 20, so you'll forgive me for that typo. But it was basically just a kind of a grassroots community group. There was like 5 of us. We had WhatsApp groups. We were predominantly, what we were doing at that point was, I guess, responding to people's needs by organising shopping, prescription, things like that. But as I'll speak to in a moment, food poverty, as it exists in Oxford, you know, it didn't arise because of COVID. It existed beforehand, but I guess what COVID did was, well, exacerbate it, but also shine a light on it, or at least make more people aware of the scale of it than would have been beforehand. So what we saw in our initial response was that actually a lot of people who might have needed shopping or whatever, they needed actually food support and food parcels. Yes, there were different hubs organising food parcels. A lot of the groups that we were working with, for whatever reason, it wasn't necessarily, it didn't fit them. They maybe were on a halal diet, they had other needs, they had needed other essential supplies support. So that's how we kind of like moved into that food supply, food parcel support scheme. And right now at the moment, we're regularly delivering with over 160 volunteers, parcels to 330 households, which is around about 1,000 people. And then we also get requests for about 100 emergency parcels a week. So an emergency parcel will be somebody will call in on the day and they say, I don't have any food, I need some food, and we'll arrange to get it to them. And then we'll have a further conversation about signposting or whether or not they would like to continue to receive support from us. We also provide toiletries, cleaning products, because we believe they're essential, nappies, and formula. God, I don't have children. I now know the expense of babies, maybe 5%, because like it's really expensive to have a baby. Formula is super expensive. Nappies are really expensive, and they're just priced in a way that's just really inaccessible to people. For example, your child tax credit is only £14 a week, and it has to go on like all the other essential supplies. And then Home Start. Healthy Start vouchers can only be used, they can't be used in stage 2, only stage 1, and they're only £4.25 a week, and formula is £10. So apart from that little segue that I took there, OMA also started the Kitchen Collective programme in May 2020. And to be honest, sometimes I'm amazed that we're still going with it, but it keeps going. So basically we're delivering freshly cooked reheatable meals, about 600 of them a week, and we have actually managed to wrangle some of the Oxford University colleges and more affluent schools into cooking the meals, and I know that Riki has picked some up and Joe's helped deliver them, and I think Azul has had maybe some of them from Kitchen Collective as well that have gone to various community groups. So yeah, we have grown a lot in the past year, and I guess when we started we didn't initially foresee it being like this, but a lot of the other speakers have spoken about, I guess, agility, being responsive and being flexible. And we are responding to a real need that's out there, from what we can see and from what we experience when talking to recipients. The way we work is that we call every recipient every week. We ask them, how they're doing, what they would like in their food parcel. We want to reduce food waste, but also it's really important to give people as much autonomy over their food choices as possible to make them feel empowered. And it's also very much more grounded in the idea that we're mutually supporting one another, and that we're engaging with recipients rather than just kind of providing, a kind of a rote response. So I have a couple of slides here. Food poverty, but I'm very aware that I am on to talking about the different roles and different teams, but I'm happy to share. 30% of children in Lees, Rose Hill and Ivley are living in food poverty. As Riki said, in Blackwood, Lees is, in the top 10 in the UK for most deprivation. So Oxford City is a city of extremes and contradictions, and you have people's outside experience of it is they look at it and say, oh, it's this amazing university town and Harry Potter and all this business, but actually there's a lot of deprivation, a lot of food poverty, but there's also really rich and vibrant BMAE communities, and a lot of working class communities that are doing amazing stuff. And I guess one of the aims at Oxford Mutual Aid is to where we can break down that kind of like false separation and false dichotomy between, I guess, town and gown, as it's called, between the city, the universities, and try and allow people to have a space which they mightn't have had before, where they can engage and learn from one another. So yeah. So how are we funded? We're funded. This is a really important part of how we organize. A lot of our everything we spend goes up online, so we're really transparent, which has been really great for us in the past year, because I guess it can be difficult when you start getting a lot of donations and you're a newer group and people are like, oh, do these guys know how to spend their money properly? But because we are very transparent about what we do, what we don't do, everything, you can see it online there. So this is our setup. So basically our various different teams. So I am a director, which unfortunately for me means I sit on the oversight committee. So I have to have lots of boring discussions about PAYE and things, because we just started paying me. And yeah, there's lots of other teams, like we have the hall team, which is run by Sarah. We've got lots of volunteers who go in there, pack parcels, pack away deliveries. I don't know, they're all wizards. They do loads of stuff. We have a sourcing team that'll basically help with kind of like, I love a bit of blagging, trying to get stuff for free. So the sourcing team, we kind of focus on that, rather than like our food, main food procurement, because that's a little bit more predictable. We have a finance and legal team who do the accounts and give out to me about stuff, about overspending. No, they don't. I'm very sensible. And then we have obviously our delivery team, which make calls every week to recipients. We have our parcel driving team, which Joe is a proud member of. We have our fair share team. We have our social media team. There's lots of volunteers, and kind of what we say to people when they come and they say, oh, I don't know, now that wouldn't suit me. I can't do this or I can't do that. Listen, we'll find a role for you, because we did a volunteer survey recently, and yeah, we have hundreds of volunteers, but I'm like really active volunteers. But what's interesting from my perspective is that, like, we have people who are from 18 to I think 78. So we do have, like, and there's chunks in each and every age group, which is fantastic, because then you have people not only engaging from different communities, but different, I guess, age groups at the hall, or whether remotely. And that is an opportunity to kind of learn from each other, engage with each other. And I think that, moving forward about conversations about how do we achieve justice and equality, we can't do that without having those conversations with one another. So these are some pictures of our lovely food parcels, and you can see Kitchen Collective meal there. And here's some more Kitchen Collective meals. This is at LMH, and this is a Dragon School, the very handsome Chef James there, very handsome Chef Plamen and his lovely daughter. And Joe, actually, as well, man of all trades, did some volunteering at the King Centre Kitchen Collective. So our additional programs would be our baby supplies. We also do a lot of kind of festive stuff. So at Christmas, we had thousands of presents going out. And what we tried to do was, again, match the presents to each family. So, it would be like present for a 15-year-old boy and 4-year-old girl and 30s woman or something, and then we might have another family that'll be elderly couple. Obviously, managed expectations. It wasn't like we were giving people everything, but we tried to match things as much. And we also have done stuff during Ramadan, which was fantastic this year, with Syrian Sisters, South Asians Women's Voice, African Families in the UK, OCA, to provide, I guess, Ramadan baskets to people who were fasting. And then we did, Eid baskets, which was like nice treats and stuff. So we do festive stuff as well. Because you have to, I guess, part of like ensuring food justice is about sharing joy, because joy is a really important part of life, and supporting one another. And Nabila, who is another director, who's a woman I work with very closely. She and I there are challenges, we get tired, but there are moments when there is just pure joy doing some of this, and that's around like Eid or Ramadan or whatever. So yeah, these are the different roles that you can play at Oxford Mutual Aid, and we would love to have you. So everything we provide is completely free. We don't charge for anything. And we are really, that's a really important principle for us, because we see these most of the resources we have, at least in terms of the food, not the other essential supplies. But that's a debate for another presentation about whether or not those things should be free. So everything we provide is free, but all of our food that we get would be food surplus. It would go to waste. So we see our role as redistribution and as a communal resource, and sharing it with our community so we can support one another. And so if you're at the hall and you're packing parcels, you will be basically packing up parcels from food that we've gotten. Either Joe's brought it from Fairshare, we've gotten it from Oxford Food Hub, or Sophia have delivered it. We do buy in our baby supplies and other essentials like toilet roll, cleaning products, things like that, because we can't get them free. It would be great. We can get them at, one-off donations, but it's not consistent. So at the moment we need volunteers everywhere. But it would be, if you can drive, parcel driving deliveries, sign up for an hour shift a week, and you just basically deliver 5 or 6 parcels. You turn up to the Richard Benson Hall, and then that's it. Or if you want to do more remote work and you feel like you would get more out of engaging with recipients, you can join delivery coordination. You'd probably work a bit closer with me then. We'd be calling people, doing stuff on Excel. There's also parcel packing at the hall. Maybe you're a social media expert, which I'm definitely not. They were talking about setting up a TikTok. I was like, what? So yeah, maybe you're a social media person and you want to get involved. Grant writing, finance, legal. Basically, there's a home for you at Oxford Mutual Aid. And yeah, we're just really based on the principle of solidarity, supporting one another. We're non-hierarchical, so if you want to join a team and be part of a team and really engage with it, we'd love to have you. So yes, I'm going to stop there because I don't want to go on too long, because I could talk for hours. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I hope that was okay.
Thank you so much, Muireann. That was incredible. And my big takeaway there is just the scale at which you guys have delivered services to people who really need it over the last year. I mean, quite incredible. I think you mentioned that you're helping over 1,000 people, and that scale is incredible. So thank you so much for sharing your story and the fantastic work that Oxford Mutual Aid are part of. And again, just to echo, for anyone online this evening, there are lots of different ways that you can get involved in volunteering. If you are based in Oxford, then absolutely check out some of the details that Muireann mentioned, and getting involved with Oxford Mutual Aid, and similarly with Riki and other organisations as well, such as Oxford Brooks, and you can volunteer with Brooks. So what I'd really like to do now, we're going to have some Q&A for maybe around 10 minutes or so. We'll see how we get on. So if the speakers wouldn't mind coming back on camera again. We've got a couple of questions that have been asked. If you, for anyone online, if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask any of the panelists, then do pop them in the Q&A tab or in the chat function, and we'll get them answered. But the first question here is for Riki. There seems to be a lot happening in Botley. Do you think that Botley is different from other places in Oxford in terms of people's willingness to volunteer?
What an interesting question, Dan. I think, of course, because they're my neighbours and they're wonderful. And so, yes. But more specifically, I think It's an interesting place because there's quite a lot of different age groups, and so that kind of allows for a variety of volunteering activities. I also think the fact that there's like one clear centre to Botley, and that there's like one library and like one shopping area, and everyone kind of meets there and so on. I'd like to think that the Botley Community Fridge was kind of a start because it had been going on for a couple of years before all this happened, and then it kind of almost became like the a piece of sand that started off the Pearl, which then kind of moved on to stuff. It was also interesting because for a while, the Botley Fridge was providing food parcels all over Oxford. And then we realized that other food hubs were providing food all over Oxford. And we finally kind of got together. And what we did is we took all the OX1 and OX2 parcels, and then they took all the OX3 and OX4 parcels. It was weird because at that point, what we did is we exchanged large families providing nappies to individual older households and providing incontinence pads and pants. And maybe the fact that it is like maybe an older population overall means that people have more time, because I suspect that the younger families, especially in OX3, OX4, just don't have physically the time to do much volunteering. I don't know whether any of the other panelists would have a different take on this one.
The only thing I would add is that I moved to Botley just before the pandemic, and it's very much different to anywhere else I've lived in Oxford. I definitely think there's something about the community there that is very, very special. And maybe it's a coincidence because so many brilliant people live there. And also there's brilliant stuff that happens in Cowley, Rosehill, Littlemore and Headington. Oxford is a wonderful place full of brilliant people, but there's definitely something about Botley, having lived there for 9 months, sadly not anymore, I've moved now, but there's definitely something. I think there's something in that. Botley's a bit of a special place.
Thanks, Joe. We've got a question here for, sorry, thank you, Joe and Riki there for your thoughts on that question. I have a question for Clayton and Azul. It's a two-part question here, really. The first one is just around you were speaking around partnership work earlier on, and the fact that you kind of actively engaged in working with local partners to further the impact of the work of Oxford City Council. It'd be really great just to kind of understand that a bit more, and whether that is something which you think will be part of a longer term strategy as to how you engage with local partners in the way in which you're able to deliver services and increase the impact.
Yeah, definitely. Azul, do you want to start off on that one, and then I can pick up?
Yeah, I could take the first bit. I guess with having a few other partners around the table, they could probably tell you a lot more about how we've done that. But I think the message is we couldn't have done it alone, and we haven't done it alone. And the community groups, organisations and volunteers really know their communities so much better than we do. So it's how do you support with infrastructure and funding to be able to really look at the long-term sustainability of the work and the empowerment, but also the energy that the community groups have, or volunteers like Joe that want to do something in the community, but sometimes it takes quite a bit to access some of the funding. As Riki said, normally it would have taken a very long time, whereas now we're actually going through a full funding review process in the City Council to understand how better to work with partners to make sure that they're supported. We also learned kind of late last year that we couldn't continue at the same in the same process as we've been doing, and we actually found out we're not the best at it. We had a full food network and depot, but we understood that organisations like Oxford Mutual Aid, Riki's Botley Bikers were reaching so much further than we were. So we were able to put funding behind it, but also support. And you know, we've had funding grants available, and we've worked with partners to understand how we can improve even the little things. You know, me and Riki just recently we funded the floor for her food kind of storage to make sure that it met all the criteria needed to store food long term. So it's the little things to be able to really support, and the partnerships has been able to understand what they need, but also where we can improve for long-term sustainability, I guess. Clayton, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's great that you led on that one, because of all the teams in the council, your team is the one that's most directly embedded and works most directly with communities. But for other parts of the council where we don't have those relationships directly necessarily, it makes a huge difference to be able to work directly with partners to support them on the ground. Apologies, my son's a little bit upset. Tea time. Come here. And also just in terms of not only those relationships, but also in terms of trust and credibility with different sectors of the community. Being a council is a difficult kind of balancing act, because in some aspects of the council, our work is regulatory. It can be about often kind of putting frames around what can and can't be done, whereas other parts of the council, it's more enabling. So by working with partners, we can work in a far more enabling way overall, and we can also reach parts of the community we wouldn't be able to otherwise, and build those bridges and those relationships. So I think it's absolutely key. And for us, in terms of the economic development team, absolutely working in partnership is the only way that we would want to work in the future. But I think Azul's team and the work that they do in communities is the best example of partnership working from a council point of view.
Great, thank you, Clayton. And Azul there, I think it's really interesting reflection there, and just I suppose that longer term view. And looks like, Clayton, you've got your next volunteer sign up as well coming in, so good pipeline of new volunteers, which links very nicely.
That's it, we're working on the talent pipeline, yeah.
Absolutely, and almost seamlessly into a question from one of our attendees here, which I'd like to pose to Muireann first, and then move around the group. So this is from Maya. As things open and people can go back to work, and as we start to kind of get back into a inverted commas normal space, is there still an urgent need for volunteers?
Yeah. Well, yes, there is, because the pandemic was a crisis, but food poverty and food insecurity is also a health crisis. And that's what Oxford Mutual Aid is focusing on. Riki's, Botley Bikers is providing vital, empowering, engaging support to people experiencing homelessness. So things may go back to normal, debatable, but there are many other, systemic injustices in our society whereby we need to support one another in order to ensure that people can kind of have a good life, and volunteering is a big part of that. And I mean, it doesn't even, I don't know if you always need to look at it as like volunteering, because it implies some sort of labor, which, there is labor involved and stuff, but it's also like about engaging with your community and the people, that you live. Do you care that, there's such inequality and food poverty in Oxford? If you do, then engage with your community and try and help to change that. And part of that is like getting involved in different organizations or groups who do this kind of work. And in terms of OMA, like, we definitely need more volunteers all the time. But like, we're a team, and we're like, I've met some incredible people, and like, I've seen other incredible people meet each other through OMA, and friendships start, relationships start. I've just met so many people, and it's like, so yes, we might be able to go to the pub again on a Friday, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a lot to be gained from, doing this volunteering work, because like, even on a, you'll get something from it, you'll enjoy it. It won't just be, I have met some incredible people. I didn't know Riki, I didn't know Joe before this, didn't know Azul, and I can like hand on heart say, like, I have learned so much from so many people this year, and it's invaluable, Sorry, rant. I could start crying.
Thank you. No, when I used to work at Oxfam and leading the volunteer program there, our strapline was meet new people, learn new skills, and have new experiences. And I think that really nicely encapsulates what you were saying there, Muireann, around the impact of volunteering and how good it is for yourself, but also the impact and the contribution that you make to other people in how you support them. And, volunteering makes you feel better. There's so many benefits, not just for your mental health, but also your well-being and your general happiness as well. A final question that's come in here, and it's I suppose again to the panel, but maybe directing it towards Joe, is around this piece around the rise of youth volunteering and younger people feeling mobilised to get involved in a way that we haven't really seen before. Traditionally, volunteers have been in the 55 plus category and have made up the bulk of volunteers, but we've seen a shift in that over the pandemic with older people stepping back by shielding and younger people filling that space and being mobilised and engaged. And it'd be great to get your thoughts on that, Joe, by also being a young person yourself.
Thank you very much. I did have a shave today. I think in the context of the pandemic, this was a disease that affected elderly people far more than it affected young people. In fact, you could say it's hardly affected in terms of the danger of this illness, although some have affected, it's largely been affecting elderly people. And the older someone is, the more they've been affected in terms of isolating and in terms of loneliness. And so on the flip side of that, I can speak as someone who was young and fit and healthy, not particularly scared, if I'm honest, of getting the virus, but I was in a third floor flat, which I was having to isolate in. And any legal excuse to leave that flat was something that I absolutely pounced upon. It's one of the reasons maybe I did so much volunteering. Cities like Oxford are full of students who are in a similar predicament. All of the avenues of enjoyment perhaps were taken away from us, and we didn't really have that fear of leaving the house for getting this illness. And so I think you're right, Dan. What that created was a massive shift in the traditional volunteers from before being too cautious or scared or indeed wise maybe to leave their house when we're all told to stay indoors. And so I think a lot of younger people have stepped up and added, I think, quite a lot of energy and dynamism to it. And they're people, I think young people in my generation are very agile anyway, because they have to be. And so they've brought that to volunteering. The question about the urgency of volunteers, I think that will be cured by how flexible young people are in volunteering. So thankfully, although I was unemployed, I'm thankfully now in employment, which I'm incredibly grateful for, but that has restricted my ability to volunteer working full time. So I've had to change to evenings, weekends, or very early mornings. There are lots of people, though, students, people that do shift work, healthcare workers, although they've done their bit more so this year, but people, shift workers who can offer their time a lot more. And there are a lot of elderly people who are still very cautious about leaving their homes. So I definitely think that this is a lasting impact. And it's wonderful, I think, for the legacy of cities like Oxford, that it's young people driving the change and driving the impact. And the final thing I'll say is the relationship between older generations, younger generations, perhaps hasn't been the best. There's been a bit of a divide, and that's certainly diminishing when younger people are helping elderly, scared, frail people through a time that's affecting them. So I definitely think there's something in that, and hopefully it continues. More young volunteers.
Thank you, Joe. And I think that's a really great insight and reflection there is how volunteering brings different people together in a way that we wouldn't necessarily be able to or have the opportunity to in our everyday lives, and connect young people connecting to older people, connecting to people from different communities and different backgrounds is something that is a level playing field in volunteering. So thank you for that, Joe. Thank you to all of our panelists this evening. I found it absolutely fascinating and really incredible to hear all of their insight. So a special thank you to Azul and Clayton and Riki and Joe and Muireann for coming this evening. Before we wrap up, I just want to bring online the other two members of the Oxford Alumni Chapter, Plassie and Ella, who have been listening in the background, and I just want to I'll let them introduce themselves, but to bring them in and so that they can say hello and just introduce themselves. So Ella, if I can come to you first, please.
Hello everybody. What an amazing evening. I've been through such a roller coaster of emotions. You've condensed all the emotions of 14 months into one evening, but it's just been really inspirational. We're all active volunteers as a committee, and I volunteer with International Women's Day in Banbury, Young Enterprise and STEM ambassadors. So if anybody wants to chat to me about any of those things at any point, I'm here.
Thanks, Ella. Plassie, coming to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Plassie, and I actually volunteer on and off with Azul in the community here locally. So we've actually brought chairs out and pick up litter around the big lunch. Some of them very sunny and dry, some of them very wet and cold. I think that kind of I'm a lot older than the rest of the Oxford Chapter guys, so I've been around for a long time and volunteering in Oxford, Bicester, Banbury, anywhere. But I think the key message from last year when I was packing meals for the NHS is any generation comes together and they're one purpose cause, and it's been amazing how the generations have come together, and long may that continue, and anything that we can do to actually bring them together, because they are bringing the best out of each other, and that's very important. So, and a big kiss to Azul.
Thank you, Plassie, and you mentioned that you might be the older than us in the group, but you are definitely the most current, because Plassie's actually TikTok famous with a few million views on some of your TikTok videos. So I think it was Muireann, you mentioned that you needed someone for TikTok. So
I'll do some coaching for you, Muireann, and I'll run the initial stuff. I'll set it up for you.
I don't want to be the TikToker. So maybe what I'll do is I'm going to bring you into the fold. I've stolen her now, and you will become the TikTok star. You'll just do it all for Oma. But no, I don't want to do it. I'll run amok.
We'll all find out something new this evening, don't we? So thank you so much for that. And just finally, I just wanted to bring in Molly and Dylan, who work for Oxford Books. They're our contacts as volunteers, and have really helped to set up the group. As a group, so myself, Joe, Ella and Plassie, we've only formed just over a year ago. And we all volunteer and give up our time. As we all mentioned, we all either run our own businesses or we work for companies and organisations. And we've seen a huge value in volunteering for Oxford Brooks. And I just wanted to bring in Molly and Dylan. I know that you wanted to mention, Molly, about ways in which, if any of the attendees wanted to get involved in volunteering at Brooks, then there are lots of different opportunities for those people to be able to do that.
Yeah, we're always looking for volunteers, and as the committee, as Dan has just said, everybody in the committee here are volunteers, and it's been brilliant to be able to take forward the agenda and the events and have that kind of buzz and push to do these events. But we're always looking for also alumni volunteers to be mentors for students and recent graduates, relaunching our Brooks Connections platform this September. So that'd be great if you're interested in mentoring, and it's virtual mentoring. So that's useful if you don't have to travel. And we're also looking for speakers for webinars, similar to this one. And we'll be doing a program in the autumn as well around some of the higher interest events, a bit like the AI event that was hosted by the Oxford Chapter a few weeks ago, which was really interesting as well. And other things are if you're working in a business or a company and you can offer internships or work placements to students, that's a really beneficial way of giving back to our current students as well. So there's an array of different ways of giving back, which would be great to hear from you. I think you'll get a message tomorrow if you're attended tonight, or if you weren't able to, we'll also email the other people, and I'll give you some more details of how to get in contact with us as a team. But yeah, it's been a really interesting evening. Thank you to everybody else who's been able to, tonight I've just been sitting there going, it's amazing what everyone's been doing in the field, particularly of supporting Oxfordshire and the food poverty. It's been a real eye-opener, some of the statistics you've shared as well tonight for me, being an Oxford person.
Great, thank you, Molly. So we'll look to wrap up the webinar on time, which I think is the most surprising thing this evening, that we managed to keep to time with so many panelists and so many interesting conversations that we've had. So just a final thank you from me for attending this evening. As Molly mentioned, there'll be some more information coming up after today, and hopefully the recording will be hosted somewhere, Molly.
So I'll send it out also to everybody tomorrow. It'll just be an open link you can watch and keep and share with whoever you want to share it. So it's great to share it. It'll be for anybody, and it'll be in the email sent to you tomorrow. Fantastic,
thank you. So yeah, if you're able to share that with your network, that'd be fantastic. We also have a LinkedIn group, so do search for us. The hesitation is because I cannot remember what it is called off the top of my head. Someone please help me out.
It's Oxford Brooks, Oxford Chapter, Oxford Brooks Alumni Oxford Chapter.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
I'll put it again. I'll put it in the email tomorrow.
Thank you. So you can tell I run a tight ship for the Oxford chapter for getting our LinkedIn group. So there we go.
But I'll share it tomorrow as well.
Brilliant. Well, final goodbyes from all of us. Thank you for attending this evening. It's been great, and we hope to see you again at another event soon. Bye for now. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.